There it is. We're live.
Hello.
Um,
Hello.
so I'm here today with both Ben and Jax. Um, Ben and well, why don't we just go ahead and introduce yourselves? Ben, you can start if you don't mind.
I'm Ben. I'm the course leader at Stanford University, but I'm also a PhD researcher, and I look at horror and fear in tabletop role-playing games, but specifically kind of what allows games to facilitate that. Um, so that's me. Big Warhammer nerd as well.
And then Jax, who they've seen before, but who they may never
Yeah,
see before.
yeah. I don't even know if I talked about this side of it, but I'll bring that in. I'm a researcher doing some development of research at Staffordshire University in the games department, and I have a PhD, but it's actually in film. Uh, so I'm kind of coming at things from that angle. But I'm a practitioner and an academic basically. So that's me.
And I'm just some dumb bald guy who happens to know a lot of really smart people.
You're the bacon, man. Come on.
Yeah.
I really, as always, appreciate you guys coming to speak. Ben, you first time, who I do, in fact, hope to have back if that's not too
Absolutely.
bold.
Yeah.
And Jax, who I always enjoy speaking with. I think we have some really great conversations. So you, Ben, and I really would like for this to be conversational. Hey, Jordan Fuzz, how are you? Thanks for showing up.
Hello.
I really want this to be conversational. I don't have anything prepared, so it's not going to be any kind of like interrogation. But I do have a genuine interest in your field of study, and even backstage before we went live, I had brought at least one of them up. So maybe we just start from there.
I appreciate the interest as well. So thank you for having me.
I think it's fascinating, and I think that it's fascinating. Starting off specifically with regard to character agency. Now, I would differentiate character agency from player agency. Hello, everyone. Hello, Olivia. Hello, Sunbeam. Thank you for attending. I would differentiate character agency from player agency. If you ask me to get specific on why or how, I'm not going to be able to identify it here as I sit in front of you. It's sort of at the moment just an intuition that I haven't quite yet gotten to the end of a thought process on. I think they're pretty. I think that it's a pretty obvious difference, right? Because the player is behaving in ways that the character cannot. So I do think that they're separate, but I think that good horror. The core of horror is the limitation of character agency, specifically with regard to role-playing games, because I think at the heart of horror is a lack of control. And so you need to limit that outlet for control. I've cited this example to Jax and also you, Ben, behind the scenes. This actually isn't my own example. It's an example that I came out of discussing the topic with Sable Phoenix. He's a friend and a channel regular. But horror is, if you'll pardon the crude example, is very much like the gun that you don't have ammunition for. So it's the hope of being able to overcome the monstrous adversary, but it's the despair of the uselessness of the item without the active ingredient. And I would love to hear your opinion on that. Like, is it a bad assumption? Is it a good assumption? Is it different with regard to role playing? Is it similar? So I'll just leave it there and let you kind of.
Yeah. So with agency, so there's I mean, when you're talking about agency, you have to be careful to not go down the path of let's try and define agency, because there's so many. Agency is contextual, right? Sure. Agency, I believe the definition of agency is when the player's action creates meaningful play. But then you get into the solution of what is meaningful play? Meaningful play could just be hitting W and walking, or meaningful play could be doing a finisher in Space Marine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's two types of agency. There's perceived agency, and then there's designed agency. So there's agency that the game has, and then there's agency that is designed for the game itself. So it kind of gets the designer when you're making a horror game. You're correct. You want to limit agency for the player, because even if you look at like so video games and tabletop games share similar ludology with each other because they're both games, so they can mimic from each other. So if you look at Resident Evil, you have a limited inventory space. You look at Dead Space, you've got a limited inventory space. You can carry 4 weapons, but you can only carry so much ammo for them, right? If you look at Signalis, you can only carry so much stuff, right? It's the same in like horror TTRPGs. I'm always going to reference Alien role-playing game because it's one of my favorite horror games. You can only carry up to double your strength, which means at max you can only ever carry 10 things. Well, 10 units of things. Some things weigh 2. So they have designed into the game straight away a limit of how much stuff you can carry, and that includes your armor as well. The weight of your armor doesn't just go away when you're wearing it. It's still there. So by design, they have limited the agency of the player. But then when you're playing the game has a stress mechanic. And the GM can, when you fail your stress roll, the GM can do a wide number of things to make your day really bad. Like that door you're trying to open, no, you don't anymore. That gun you're shooting, that was the last bullet you fired. And all of a sudden, your control is taken away from you. Your ability to deal with the situation has just been 180'd on you now, because of the stress mechanic. And now you've got to figure out a new way to deal with the thing that's about to come kill you. So you're right. It's exactly about taking away that agency. But when that is done is what can make the game feel fun, because it's helplessness versus hopelessness. You want the player to feel like they can't do anything, but in reality they can. And that's what makes a game stressful for the player. Hi, Sable.
Hey, Sable. Thanks for stopping by.
That's really interesting because it's the opposite in film. Like in film, you're trying to make the viewer feel like anything's possible, and in reality it is one fixed thing. So that's a very interesting kind of twist on that to me.
I think that might be because in film the story is set. The viewer doesn't interact, right?
Yeah. And so this is what's interesting, like, but it's the same thing that's making horror stuff in film work, which is that limited agency.
Well, because games just took from film.
Yeah.
Like, they were inspired by a lot of horror games are inspired by film, which take some of the mechanisms from films like dark lighting, excessive body horror and gore, or using things like cosmic entities or things we can't understand, and then using that visually to allow the player to experience that. I mean, even Stalker was a film before it was a game. I think it was actually a book before it was a film as well. And
Stalker, like the Tarkovsky film?
Yeah.
Oh, they made a game. They made a game into that?
A very, very successful game series, yeah. That I haven't actually watched the film, though. My friend has told me to go watch it, and he's going to punch me for not having watched it. But I should have watched it. The film's quite eerie, right? And the way it
is.
And the game follows the same kind of premise, and they've just taken elements from the film and made it interactive. So you can assume that there is a fair lot you can take. At the end of the day, a game is a narrative. A film is a narrative, right? Just the game is interactive. The big leap comes when you take that into a tabletop experience, because now the players can do whatever they want. It isn't like Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate is still a role-playing game, but it's not a tabletop role-playing game. If you were to get all of the stuff for Baldur's Gate but run it as D&D around a table, your players would start doing all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah, it
because
would never be the same, would it?
Yeah.
Hey Heath, welcome aboard.
Sorry, Ben, I'm interrupting you.
No.
I actually would like to, if you don't mind, if we
Yeah.
could circle back. You mentioned something about the difference between helplessness and hopelessness. Could we
look at that?
Yeah, could we look at that for a bit?
Yeah. So I found this big Dead Space fan, and Glenn Schofield, who was the lead designer on Dead Space, he was making the Callisto Protocol. Unfortunately, the game didn't quite hit when it came out, but they did an entire video series where they were talking about how they were making the game scary. And this is where I came across that when I was doing my initial research, because I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna take notes from this video series. And they mentioned hopelessness versus helplessness, and I was like, okay. They wanted the player to feel like they couldn't fight the enemy, but they had the tools to fight the enemy. So you always had a melee weapon that you could always hit the enemy with, that you could always find ammo. There was always stuff you could throw the enemies into. There was always a way to kill the enemy. Just sometimes it might hurt you, or it might make, there were these giant meat grinder things you could throw the enemies into, and they'd explode into a fountain of gore, which it felt so empowering for the player, because you could just detonate these horrors and kind of bring a bit of power back, but you could always do something about it. If you look at horror films, when they have that final showdown with the monster or the murderer, the main character normally gets really beaten up or really hurt, but they kill the enemy, and they do it somehow. And there's always they're terrified whilst they're doing it, but they do it. The character feels like they can't do something, but they push through to get it done. And when you're playing a game, or when you're having an interactive experience, if your players feel like an objective is unattainable, or they just cannot do it, but they decide, no, we are badass and we're going to do it anyway, that's when they're making the players are making, with their agency, they're making the decision to overcome something difficult. And that's when you're making the players feel stressed, which can lead to the players feeling afraid, but they're not necessarily connected, because fear is a different emotion entirely. And making your players feel stressed doesn't have to be horror either, but it could be. If that answers your question, I don't know if I've just gone on a tangent on there.
No. I think it drives at what I was getting at. So helplessness would be a legitimate incapability of players to affect a situation. Hopelessness is the seeming inability of the players to affect a situation, but they have all the tools at their disposal to actually overcome.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you want them to feel hopelessness, but not...
Yeah.
Or maybe you want them to feel helplessness, but you actually are creating hopelessness.
Yeah.
It's victim versus hero.
Yeah.
A victim is helpless. A hero might be hopeless, but does it anyway.
Yeah. And if you create an enemy that... there's a lot of video games that do that, like Prince of Persia, Sands of Time. Life is Strange. Yes, please. Yeah, no, exactly.
I actually have a question for you, Ben, after we look at this. Just kind of a little bit about tone setting in this. So, I'm just interested in... I understand. So, if we sat here and we're like, let's make a horror film, or we're like, let's make a horror video game. I'm like, okay, awesome. I've got it. We're going to set it in a warehouse. It's going to be flickering lights, and there's going to be a creepy sound design. But when you're running your Alien games, for instance, how do you tone set without visual aids?
So, a few ways. So, I ran a game recently, with when my work coworkers came over, and I mean, I've...
Oh, dope. Amazing.
That's
I bought a flight jacket.
Quite awesome.
And I made some key cards, lanyards, and I gave them to everyone when they entered, and they wrote their name on it in pen. And then they sat around the table and they made their colonists. And instantly, when they arrived, they kind of got into this kind of, I had the jacket on, I had my own lanyard on, and I kind of set that tone from the get go. We're making colonists. Welcome to the colony. And I was almost role playing when they arrived. But having those physical elements helped kind of add to the experience. And then they started making their characters. And I played some ambient music. Now, when I do this online, I spend, a tremendous amount of time handcrafting maps. I do handouts. I've currently got a living and breathing Discord, which has got a persistent world. So I do updates every month. So it feels like something's always happening. And then when they get in the game, they've got a very highly curated map with ambient audio, lighting to kind of add to that experience. Because if you want to make something creepy, you just turn the lights off, right? Make it dark, add some flickering lighting, play some spooky music, and all of a sudden the players instantly jump into that tone. When I had my co-workers around, they were fighting. They went down to a cave, and I skipped ahead to a song in my playlist that I'd made that was really creepy. And one of my players said, cool, the music's telling me I should be afraid now. And it's like music is so powerful, right? And I'm sure as someone who knows more about film than me,
well, you just made me think of when, I'm a Zelda kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you just made me think of when you're, around those frickin' Skulltulas, and the music starts going, and you where it's gonna drop from the sky, or whatever it is. Music does a lot of heavy lifting.
Redeads got me.
Oh my god!
The Redeads were the ones that got me.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
I absolutely hated it. If I was in an area that I didn't have to be in and there were redeads, I don't need to do this. I'll just go over here to this other temple. Hated it.
But yeah, again, borrowing, directly from film, just borrowing from theater, so you use music in your live stuff.
Yeah, I do ambient audio as well. So a few sessions ago, they went into a city center to investigate the head of this tower, and there were a load of dead Marines. I found some radio chatter audio that I had that only played within 2 meters of the bodies. So when they approached the dead troops, and they had the lights on their guns still pointing in different directions where they dropped them. And whenever they would approach the troops, they would hear their radios still going off, but only if they actually got close enough to them. So I'm sure not all of my players got that experience, but the ones that checked to see if they were alive still did. And it just adds a little bit extra to the game, which at the moment they might not think about, or they might not go, oh, that was a thing, but it subconsciously tells you that's an extra thing, right? And it just helps set the tone and sets the mood. The problem is, though, all it takes is for one of your players to make a dick joke, and all of your tension gone. Everyone starts laughing, and you've lost a lot of that tension that you've built up. I feel like, and this is going to be an unacademic opinion, but film is easier to maintain tension and horror than a role-playing game, because in a game it's really easy for a player to just go, oh, I'm on my phone, or to look away from the screen, or it's just easy for them to do that, and it's also from my initial study I've done, I think it is unfair to ask of a player to stay that mentally locked into a game for 4 hours. It's like, you shouldn't. They're there to have fun, right? And that's a lot. That is a cognitive load. Let's pretend that I'm going to be stressed. Let's pretend that I'm afraid of this thing for 4 hours straight. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot for the head to cope with.
Yeah, and
I'd be interested in the actual getting into the details of the results of that study. Maybe not on this stream, but in a future stream, I think that would be really very
It should be complete after next Monday. And I can do
Oh,
a
it's not even
write-up.
complete yet. Oh, so it'll be fresh. Well, hey, I'll tell you what. If you want to talk about it, I am very happy to give you a platform to do that.
I'd appreciate it. Sable asked a pretty interesting question. Well, their statement saying
he did. Yeah. Which one? You want?
Felt plenty stressed during non-horror RPGs. I can actually go in on that. So,
just before you do that, I was actually going to highlight this comment because my question was, stress, and you even made the distinction that putting players under stress isn't necessarily putting them in that fear state which exists apart. So, I guess, how do you achieve the fear?
You don't.
That was a really quick answer.
you don't, because the brain, when fear is a response to stimulus, right? At its core, if you want to be like really, really basic, fear is a response to hostile stimulus, something that is going to threaten you bodily or mentally, right? So it's why when you break up with a girlfriend or a boyfriend and you feel heartbroken and you feel hurt, because the brain associates pain and fear as a physical thing, even if it's mental, and you'll feel physical pain from it, right? Fear is when something is physically a stimulus is going to endanger you. You're playing a role-playing game and you're running away from a monster. You are not going to be afraid of that, period, unless the GM is pointing a gun to your face, like an actual gun. You're not going to be afraid, right? But what you will be feeling is you'll be feeling tense, and tension is a subset of anxiety, and anxiety is really tricky because it triggers in everyone completely differently, and everyone regulates anxiety differently. So what you're actually trying to do when you're making your players afraid is you're trying to make them stressed. That's what you're trying to do, because that will make them start making more risque decisions. It will make them start doing dumber things because they're stressed. The amount of times I've moved, like I flanked my party of a load of enemies and they've all gone, oh, shit. That's the moment when they feel stressed.
So you pressure them essentially with the stress into making decisions that, I guess, they're based. I would say the majority of the decision is going to be based on ending the stress as soon as possible, and you can sort of count on that to kind of guide the experience toward a more horror type experience or a more fearful type experience
because of limiting agency.
Right.
So,
right.
To give the anecdotal evidence for this, at the moment I run a Halo Mythic game. All of my players play as Spartans. They've all got ammo that's got more letters than my name. And the moment something scary enters the battlefield, they just shoot it 50 times till it stops moving. And if that doesn't work, they'll shoot a rocket at it. That's their solution to big scary things. They'll expend their special ammo to kill it. Then it will die. The moment they see a different token come on the field, they immediately assume it's something that's designed to hurt them, and they'll kill it straight away. But if you're playing Alien, the xenomorph mechanically is designed in a very brutal way, and one alien can solo an entire party and kill everyone by itself. It is designed to do that. So all of a sudden, you can't just shoot the thing to death, because it will acid bleed on you, and that can kill you. Or it's got a high chance of just killing you first. And once the players figure out how it works, they're more afraid of it. And how it does work is the alien has a hit chart, and on its turn, you roll a d6. On anything above the xenomorph drone, if you roll a 6 or a 5, it instantly kills you. You die. It just, you're gone. Dead. I think 5, you get to roll armor. 6 is the head bite, it just kills you. So once the players figure out how it works, all of a sudden they're like, let's run, maybe. Or maybe if they're feeling brave, they'll try and beat the thing to death with hammers, which actually one of my groups did in the study. They bolt gunned it to a wall and beat it to death with hammers. And they got acid blood all over them, and it half killed the party. So even when they won the fight, when they killed the alien, and it was just a regular ass xenomorph drone, when they killed that thing, they all took loads of damage from it. So they survived. They didn't win. They survived, but the players felt awesome. They were like, "Hell yeah! I just pinned the thing to the wall, held it by its neck, and we all hit it to death." And they felt great. And that's the important element when you're trying to craft these horror experiences. You don't want to make your enemies so difficult that they just win, because then it's unfair and it's not fun, right? And your players are coming to having xenomorph eating players like yeah, they'll do that. Even when you're playing Colonial Marines, they'll do that, which is great. It's like, you know, a question, Jax?
I'm just really interested in a lot of this. So I get what you're saying. If the enemy's too beefed up, we're getting into helplessness, right? Like it's not fun. Or if they're not difficult enough as well, right? Like it's really unsatisfying in any
unless
game.
there's a lot of them.
Right, yeah. The little chicken dinosaurs from Jurassic Park 2. Like, right? Scary as shit. Like but I think I'm circling back to question. You can continue while I try to remember it. But I think it had to do with no, again, it's gone. It had to do with something about agency, but that's fine.
We can move on, and then if you remember, because that's how my memory works. At the 5 minutes from now, I'll remember what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
There's more really good conversation question coming out of chat. Yes. I'd like to start here with Sable Phoenix. Yeah, the physical elements. Can we unpack that? One of the most legitimately effective horror RPGs I've ever come across is 10 Candles. Yeah. Lots of physical elements in addition to the game mechanics, employing a form of ticking clock, but a clock that's randomized. I have a particular fondness for 10 Candles as well. I am sort of more recently becoming exposed to games that use a physical element to immerse the players to great effect. 10 Candles is one that I was only made aware of recently through Heath's channel. He covered 10 Candles, and it may have even been at Sable Phoenix's request, but there's a whole dearth of games out there like that. So I'm very interested to hear your answer in, the physicality of or the potential physicality of an immersive element or something along those lines.
I think it adds it. I mean, I originally heard 10 Candles at Worldcon, actually, when one of the speakers mentioned, like, he said, you should play 10 Candles. But I think physicality adds a whole extra dimension to the game. Like, if you give your character the name cards, or you give them something, and when they die you take it off the player, all of a sudden they've now lost something they had. You gave them something and now you've taken it from them, not only because their characters died, but they've actually lost something now, right? And if they were to come in and you could say, this is yours to keep, and then when they die you take it off them, they're going to feel the betrayal of that, but it's also going to help kind of pull those emotions as well, which is kind of what you're wanting to do anyway, if you're wanting your players to feel that way.
Yeah.
But having actual things is something you can enter. It makes the game tactile, right? It's why we roll dice, right? Because you could just say, oh yeah, my dude shoots the thing and wins. That's role playing still, technically, right? But we have dice to add to the experience because now we feel like we can actually, impact the experience. And by having something to touch or something additional, maybe even like having the lights dimmed, all of a sudden it's actually dark. And now I'm going to circle back to something to get to this.
Yeah.
The way we experience fear is through things we don't understand. But being able to be immune from fear kind of goes both ways. You can either be really knowledgeable about the thing, like you're not afraid of it, or you can be very ignorant of the thing and not be afraid of it. So, for example, there's like giant energy breakers, the ones that the people have to wear those big suits and they have to pull it with like a hook, or else the voltage will kill them, right? If you know nothing about that machine, you can just walk up to it and pull the thing and not be remotely afraid of it. But if you know a little bit about it, you're like, oh, that's got enough volts to kill me. I'm not going anywhere near it. Instantly, unless you are really ignorant now, you're not going to touch it.
Are you familiar with Old Man Henderson by any chance?
Yes, yeah, I have the Henderson tale. Yeah,
sounds exactly like what you're describing.
And it's like every time I play Alien with a new group, they will. Yeah, I know, Ladius, you'd beat a xenomorph totally, right? Every time I've run Alien with a group for the first time, they will approach the alien not knowing what it does, and it kills one of them in like one turn, and then the group back off because now they understand how it works, but that makes them more afraid, right? If we're adding in physical elements, like it's a Call of Cthulhu game, so we're gonna have a bunch of candles on the table, and we're gonna have a bunch of like artifacts and stuff on the table. Instantly your players are familiar with that and they understand that, and it helps them become immersed. It helps them add to that experience, right? Maybe even like get some like perfume or something, or scent the room, so that when they sit down, or ask all your players to come dressed up, and it just straight away adds that, yeah, I'm a noir detective, that's what I am. And it will help add to the experience. Or they might feel a bit silly if they haven't done role playing before. They might feel a bit out of their league, right? And it's you need to know your group, right? But definitely, I need to say I think with big asterisks, because I don't know that physicality actually makes the experience better, but I know it has done for me in the past. In fact, when I ran Alien for my birthday, I did a marathon game where we ran all of Saturday, all of Sunday.
Wow.
And
Whoa.
The first thing that I did was, so I bought everyone custom mugs with the ship's name on, and I bought everyone like Nescafe instant coffee, like some like real shit ass instant coffee, because in Alien they get shit ass instant coffee.
I thought this was your birthday, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You bought everybody else stuff?
I bought them ID badges and yeah.
It's really awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really great.
They were all really tired in the morning, and all their characters woke up from cryo, and the first thing I told them all to do was to read their briefing package and make a cup of coffee. So they all got up, made a cup of coffee, they came back really grumpy with their coffee and read the mission briefing, and straight away they're in the mind of their character because of that little extra silly thing.
That's incredible,
right?
Me. And I, while you say that you can't know whether or not this is true objectively, I think that it's pretty well commonly accepted that if you're going to play a horror video game, you play it at night with the lights off, right? Because that adds to the experience, because your house becomes, or apartment, or wherever you live, your dwelling, wherever you're playing the game, becomes an unknown, because you can't see into the corners anymore, and because it's night out, you don't know what's out there looking at you from the street, and so it sort of allows that that more intense that it kind of ratchets the fear, whether or not you are consistently aware 100% that you are in no danger whatsoever. Just putting yourself into that physical space, I think, is pretty commonly accepted as, if not the correct way to play it, then at least a more a more evocative way to play.
Mhm.
Would you
So
say it's more fun? I think it's arguably more fun, and I think it's because anxiety, fear, it releases like you're going to be releasing endorphins.
I am the biggest baby in the world, like the biggest. I've told this story, I don't know how many times now, but when I was a young child, very, very young, my parents were leaving me with my grandparents to babysit me overnight on a weekend. And on one of the late night channels, John Carpenter's Thing was on. I had no idea what I was getting into. Sat there, watched it, and it has literally scarred my psyche for life. Like, I am very, very timid when it comes to horror. Now, obviously, 45 years old, I've grown out of some of it. I love the Alien franchise. I love, like, there are some other movies that, like 80s horror movies, completely incapable of watching those until like 3 years ago. And then it's like they're campy and they're fun and they're funny. So, like, I can handle it now, but I am not the person to ask with regard to fun and horror, because I am just the biggest baby.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I put it in our like private chat. That actually links to, I remember what I was going to say, which is the reason I think, because I have a story like, I think a lot of people probably have a story like that, where like you were too young to watch the film that you watched or to play the thing or to whatever it was, and it scars you for life and you're forever afraid of that. And I think there's not an agreement with you in that, right, that you don't basically consent to be scared in that situation. You get scared because you're not expecting, you're 3 or 4 and you think,
Mhm.
oh, this is fun, I like cartoons, and then it's terrifying, and but the notion that Ben was talking about, where fear is not really possible, and it's because we freely consent, and for most of us, like, unless you have really shitty friends like like surprise you with stuff, to go, I'm going to play a horror game, which means I'm going to mimic fear, I'm going to mimic this sensation, because for whatever reason I find that enjoyable. But therefore at no point will I truly be scared. And I think back to the times when I've been like truly, like, I think actually truly like disturbed by something, and I think it's when it's for instance, the film what the fuck's it called, with Toni Collette, that came out a couple of years ago, really scary, guy who made Midsummer. God, it begins with an H. It's gonna bug me. Chat.
Hereditary? Is it Hereditary?
Hereditary. That film scared the crap out of me because I wasn't expecting it to be so creepy.
I have been warned off of that film.
Do not watch it.
Yeah, that's what I've been told. I've been warned off of that.
If you don't like horror, like, it's wonderful, it's brilliant, it's unbelievably, like, the tone is just gorgeous in a horrifying way. But like, if you're not going into it going, okay, this is creepy, it really is unsettling.
What I find the most horrifying is when I can attach what I'm seeing or reading or experiencing in a fiction to something that actually happens in the real world. That's what really gets me. I become very anxious. I become very emotional. I tend to shut down when those sorts of things happen. I can't watch certain pieces of media as a result. And so if it's along those lines, if it makes that connection, and it's also something that I find disturbing or I am emotionally passionate about, then it's not something that I can still watch it. I can still go into it. It's just something that requires a great deal of introspection and preparation before I sit there. And it also probably involves spoilers in some measure, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to prepare. And in that, I think I lose quite a bit of the intended impact, which is, it's a personal foible, but those are the things that I find the most frightening, are the things that I look at and go, well, that could actually really happen. And, I express some measure of passion about it. whether it's familial connection or animal rights or something along those lines. I just like there are things that I just can't deal with without that prep.
Yeah.
It's what can make a monster very terrifying, right?
Yes.
We all know the xenomorph is like sexual trauma of the creature, right?
Yes.
And we all know to some level, if we've experienced it or not, that is bad. And we can all kind of imagine how terrifying that must be. And it adds to the fear of the monster that also strikes you in the dark. And it's got like sharp claws, right? So it's also deadly on top of that. But then you've also
it's also ambivalent. It's just a part of its life cycle.
It just kills. Yeah,
yes.
It's one of my coworkers made the comment where he was like, it's like, we went to space and we found a thing, and the thing just kills. Its sole purpose is just to murder. It can't. It was what Ripley says. Like, it can't be reasoned with. It can't be bargained with. It can't be killed. It's unstoppable. Like that.
Gotta nuke the site from orbit.
Yeah, right. I'll switch the quote. God damn it! It's the element to be sure. Yeah. Almost lost my nerd cred there.
Nah, no way.
But you can also go the opposite end of the spectrum as well. So you can go like the stalker route and be like, well, I mean, we don't know what this thing does, but it kills people, or it's a giant orb, or a rival. They're big weird aliens that we don't know how they function. It's creepy. Or
it was so creepy. I've watched that movie recently. Apologies for the interruption.
No.
I was waiting for something to happen horrifying the entire movie, and it just doesn't come. But it's so unsettling. What a wonderful film.
I haven't seen it. I need to see it.
Oh, it's really,
the
really
same
fantastic.
with Annihilation as well. Annihilation is like, it's so weird, and it's excellent. Yes, perfect. Yes. But Annihilation's also a novel as well. A novel book novel. It's part of a series, which helps because I find a lot of times when stuff is adapted from a novelization, it's often has a really good, the narrative is fantastic already, off the get go. I find, and they really, my God, that. It's just so weird, and it's so different. I think the whole cliche of, I think this is why Aliens suffers now. It's every Alien film is kind of, let's go to space, let's find the monster, it kills us all, and then one person survives. Every film,
yeah,
it was great the first time, great the second time, and it's kind of just, well. Yeah, I mean, now we know what it does.
Yeah.
So it's not
and now we're kind of trapped in this cycle of trying to outdo the original Xenomorph to get to that sort of that improved experience, and it's just been nothing but, in my personal opinion, it's been nothing but failure with trying to outdo it. It's such an iconic monster. It's already good enough.
Yeah.
You just have to do something different with it,
Genuinely, I think it's the downfall of technology applying to it. Like we have too much technology now. We're trying to get too clever with it. Where when they made Alien and Aliens, they had really limited technology. There's some really weird pictures of the original things they tried out to make it. I think it was was it on a cat? No.
They wanted to put it on a dog for Alien.
A dog. They were going to put it on a dog. And they had to cut around it basically, and it makes it so much scarier that you don't really see it until the last shot of the film.
Yeah, not only that, but it's not fast. It's very slow, and the gestures that it makes in the original film is pretty much just throwing its arms out. It's either laying sideways, throwing its arms out, or it's kind of standing up in the darkness, throwing its arms out. Obviously there's more to it than that, but it was very sparingly used.
Yeah.
And as a result is terrifying, because you don't know what it is, where it's going to appear, how it's going to behave. It doesn't have to be fast. It just has to be sudden and unknown.
Yeah. Sorry, no, go ahead, Ben. Go ahead. I was just gonna say it's like the Michael Myers thing in like the first Halloween, that he just walks everywhere and he's just there, and like
It's the SpongeBob meme. He's just over there.
he's just over there.
Menacingly.
Yeah. Yes, but yes, exactly. He's just there, and yeah, Judenfest is mentioning Jaws, which is like my go-to with this, as Bacon knows. I'm a big fan of the Jaws.
Yeah, one of the greatest films I think ever. It's one of the greatest films of all time, in my opinion. Yeah.
But the xenomorph is just like somehow everywhere on the ship, like at what, like it's everything everywhere all at once. It's the original.
It's the same for like in video games and tabletop as well. So the uncertainty leads to making the players feel afraid. So feeling tense. See, a horror game say, "Oh, we're gonna make you feel afraid." It's not. But you'll say you do, which is the interesting thing. Like you'll say, "Oh, that game made me scared." It didn't really, but you think it did, right?
Yeah.
But like being uncertain of an outcome adds its own layer of stress to a game. If a dice roll, like if you've got to escape and everything is hinging on your dice roll, all of a sudden the result of that roll now has more weight. And that's more tense, right? And it's to reference Sable asked Alien as a heartbeat, where it's tension, spike.
Yep, I have that.
Tension, spike. Yeah. So earlier when I said like it's unreasonable to ask your players to be consistently afraid all the time,
that's exactly what I wanted to bring up. It's easy to do in a 1.5 hour to 2 hour film because you finally get that release and break at the end of the film. But for a 4 hour or God forbid, an 8 hour gaming session, yikes.
So Alien does this really well. So the Alien role-playing game has a stress mechanic where, so it's a D6 polling system. So it's the Year Zero engine. If anyone's played any of the Year Zero games like Coriolis or Tales from the Loop, which I really want to play. But
I actually quite love Free League. Their games are fantastic. I have all the Alien materials. I haven't played it yet though.
You should. It's good.
If only I had someone to run it.
An invitation. I'll have to clear time for you. It's got a stress mechanic.
I don't want to put upon you. I know that you're.
No, I will. I'll make time.
If I offer to be a part of a study, then maybe.
Yeah.
I'm happy to
collaboration.
Yes.
So it has this stress mechanic where you add d6s to your dice pool. But on the stress dice, if you roll a 1, it makes your character have a stress event, a panic attack. Something happens, and that can be based on the stress table, where that can be you. I mean, for a starter, you fail the roll, even if you had successes on the other dices. If you roll panic, you fail the check. So immediately, having stress means that you're more likely to succeed, but also simultaneously you're more likely to have a breakdown or something's going to happen. Right now, I found that the best way to handle stress in the Alien system, because it's really easy to gain stress, but it's also really easy to lose stress as well. So your stress when you're playing Alien with a good GM that knows what they're doing, your stress will go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. As the game goes on, your character is going to be hyper stressed when they're fighting the alien, but when you run away from the thing and you get around the corner and you close a door, at that point the GM should take stress away from you. Not all of it, but they should take a chunk of it off you, because you're safe now. You're behind a locked door. Well, I mean, you think you're safe. Yeah, and the character should now be less stressed, right? And I'd even argue if you're playing Colonial Marines and you kill an alien, you should lose stress for that. You've killed one of the creatures. But when more of them come around the corner later, your stress should go back up again. And it's that flip-flop, and it mimics the film, right? You want your players to go through this roller coaster of, okay, okay, because it's more fun that way. Plus, we're only human, and we're not going to we are not going to maintain that state of being stressed for the entire game. No one's going to do that unless they are like so into it. But even me as the GM, when I'm super into it, I'm not going to do that. So it's your players should be going through this, and you should like ludically design levels that way as well. So you should have your encounters specifically put together so the players are high stress situation, cool down, high stress situation, cool down, and then do that. Even shooters do it, right? Like in Call of Duty, there'll be like a Battlefield thing. This is coming to my head. There's a tank mission on Battlefield 3. One of the guys gets wounded. You have to run out. Everyone's got to give you cover. You got to like detonate the explosives on the bridge and come back. High stress. You have to get out the tank. All of a sudden, you can be shot now, and it's a high stress situation. But it's not for the entirety of the mission. Even in Alien Isolation, the xenomorph chases you, but after you escape it, it goes away. So the stress comes and goes, and it's that moment-to-moment play. If it's constantly stressed, it's not going to be fun. Remember, your players are trying to survive. They're not trying to be afraid. They've come to play a survival horror game.
So, this is you've brought up fun several times, and I think it was in a conversation that we were having via Facebook, where the experience for the character in the game, and sometimes for the player in the game, is not necessarily fun. It's anxiety, it's tension, it's fear, it's horror. But then at the end, after that final tension is released by saying, okay, the game's over, or the session is over, and you ask, whether or not they had fun or what their experience was, they'll give you a completely different report to what they had experienced.
Yeah.
Can you go into that a little bit? Is there much more to say about it? Or I'm sure.
Yeah. So it's so far the data from what my studies looked at is it measured their emotional responses before they played the game, and then it measures their emotional response after they've played the game, and I find that after they've played the game, their emotional chart, I'm using the PANAS, which is the positive negative scale. After they are less stressed, they feel more proud, more emboldened, and their positive emotions go up and their negative emotions go down. There's not much of a shuffle. A lot of it seemed quite similar, but there is a bit of a shift. But in their exit interview, they'll say, like, one of them was like, yeah, I thought we were all going to die at that one point, so I felt like I had to go help my friend. Or the one group that pinned the alien to the wall, they were like, yeah, it felt awesome when we had to grab the alien. They had to grab the alien, right? To help their friend. These people had never met each other before. Like even as friends, they were all just randomly sourced from different locations, but they felt like they had to help each other. They were role-playing. They had to help each other in face of adversity, right? So they said they felt that need, that helplessness when they were fighting the alien. They said that they felt afraid, or they felt helpless, they couldn't do anything, or that they had to run, or they felt afraid. They said they felt these things, but emotionally on the chart, they didn't say they did. So they are experiencing those emotions, but not necessarily. But that doesn't really matter, really, because the player still thinks they did. So then you've won, right? Because if they think they were afraid, like, oh, that was a really tense fight. Objective complete. You've done your job. Because you've made the encounter stressful in a fun way. And it's such a hard line to get between, because if you do it too much, you're going to stress your players out and they're going to get annoyed with the scenario.
Sure. Yeah.
And you need to manage it. And it's why you can't just surprise your players with a horror game. It's not a good thing to do. If you tell them, I'm running a horror game, they'll come into that game knowing that they should be expecting to do that. When I first ran Alien, I had to explain to my friends, you're playing blue collar workers. You are just a dude.
Yes.
Even if you're a Marine, you're just a dude with a bit of steel on your chest.
Yeah.
Like, you are Person McGee. The company doesn't give a shit about you. Your life is worth less than money, and there is space monsters that will instant kill you. Play accordingly. And they did. They were so damn cautious. And this probably didn't help because we came off the back of playing Dark Heresy. So they rolled observation every time they walked into a room because they were adamant that something bad was going to happen to them. But
Sure.
is that winning? A dude playing it? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But like, then they're playing differently, right? And lethality adds to that, right? My Halo Mythic game, the Halo Mythic system is built to be inherently lethal. So when the players understand that being shot in the face once can kill you, all of a sudden they play differently. They stack up at doors. They throw flashbangs into rooms. They spend 20 minutes being strategizing for how they're going to tactically kick a door open and kill what's in front of them. They make those decisions because they know if they don't, they're going to die. But that's not horror, but it's still making them feel at least a little bit stressed, or else they wouldn't be making those decisions to begin with, right? So feeling anxious and feeling stressed and tense does not have to be horror, but it is greatly weaponized when you do horror, because you want to exaggerate those experiences.
Yeah,
That's incredibly interesting.
You're getting into something that I think it was Sable mentioned before, which is like this thing of, I've felt stressed in non-horror games. And I think essentially what you're talking about is stakes.
Yeah.
And
to lose.
Whether it's a horror game or just like good old fashioned D&D, which is however you feel about it, it's not a horror game generally, right? Mm-hmm. But like if you're just playing and it's like, oh well, you're a superhuman and nothing can really kill you, and we're just gonna go along and like you're gonna kill this like this dude who's over here, and there's no stakes. Mm-hmm. And you're not gonna feel stressed. And you're probably not gonna have that much fun.
Well, it comes down to, before any of this can take effect, before you can even remotely do any of this, first rule, players got to give a shit. If they don't, and they're not immersed, and they don't care about your world or your characters, there is no fear of anything. To link back to my Halo game, they have 2 pilot NPCs, Arlo and Kendra, and my players love their pilots to the point where they've bought them a new ship because it has more armor. They've bought them new body armor because it has more protection. They've bought them more guns in case the ship gets eventually boarded, they can defend themselves better. They care about protecting these 2 NPCs, these 2 things that aren't even real. It's technically just me putting on a bit of a feminine voice for one of them. But they care so much about them because the pilots always come pick them up regardless of what situation they're in. They always come save them. And
man, don't they know they're just
found your Galir, man? You found
right?
your Galir.
Don't they know they're just giving you ammo for later on when you take those pilots and do something terrible to them?
Well, this is the thing, is that they're trying to make me killing them harder. And usually when I run a game, they always have a dropship and it always crashes. And the game's been running for nearly a year now, and their ship hasn't been shot down yet. And one of my players said, "Hey Ben, when's it happening? When you shooting us down? Because it hasn't happened yet. It's been nearly a year. When's it happening?" And it's trying to, if your players don't care, if they didn't care about those NPCs, when and if their ship gets shot down and one of them dies, they're not going to care. They'll be like, oh, whatever. But now when it happens, they will. And that's going to give that consequence, right? Or if you kill a boss and you lose a weapon, or you've got to find what your players care about. Agency when it's gay.
Yeah, we started on agency and on.
We've come back around to it.
Yeah, we've come back around to it, and it was my uneducated view that limiting character agency is really what is the material of a horror experience, and that seems to have that seems to be true in chat as well as with the panel here today. It really is the loss of control or the loss of agency that maybe doesn't provide the experience in totality, but it's a central element of it. Kind of has to be limited in order to get at a proper, fearful horror experience.
Yeah,
or at least the perception of it.
Or the
right?
perception. Yes,
Yeah.
that's a much better way to phrase it.
Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
perception of, yes.
And Sable asked about like games that promote PvP. Alien does it all the time. There's always like casting agendas that make the characters have to act against each other. Now, I found from experience that this works really great for one shots. Paranoia, I had the pleasure of playing this at the UK Games Expo with my friend Dax, and he was like, "You gotta play Paranoia." So you played Paranoia, and that was great because everyone had opposing objectives. But Paranoia isn't a horror game, but it felt pretty stressful because the world's weird and everything was odd, and we had these opposing objectives, and it had consequence. There was consequence, but it was silly. It was silly and fun, but I still cared about wanting to complete my objective. But you have to be careful when it's player versus player. I think it's really important to be very upfront with your group and tell them that there is a possibility that you might end up opposing each other. I don't allow my players to kill each other, though. In the cinematic scenarios for Alien, there's optionality that it might not happen based on how people role play their decisions, but it can happen. And I think you have to make sure you have the right group of players for that. Because when they're down for it, it's great because you can have like standoffs where I had a standoff with two players. They were in the escape room with one escape shuttle, and they were pointing their guns at each other, and the two players were trying to negotiate with each other over who got the cryo tube. And it was really stressful because they at that point they were just negotiating with each other. They weren't even rolling dice. I just let them talk to each other, and then one of them fired the gun, and then the alien heard them, and it all went just as horrible as you think it would.
That's very incredible to sort of have that, to have such an investment at the table that it's just an instance of pure role play where everyone's bought into the stakes and everyone's invested in the outcome, and it's. Even when it's, even if each player wants a different outcome, that becomes really incredible. And I haven't mentioned this the whole stream with regard to like session 0 or a social contract, but it seems like horror, because it keeps coming up, you keep mentioning this, it depends on your player buy-in. So it really seems that among the types of games that you can play, among the types of experiences that you can, use these games to elicit, horror is really one that requires a very explicit outlay of the experience beforehand and a very specific sort of buy-in. So that becomes extremely important. I think that it's important for any game, but for horror in particular, it seems to be very, very essential.
Yeah,
I think it's like a safekeeping thing as well. Sorry, Ben, I keep jumping in over.
No.
Sorry.
No, you are right though. It is a safeguarding thing. Yeah,
it's absolutely a safeguarding thing because in horror, you're going to encounter more things that could potentially be triggering for people.
Yes.
So like, you've got you've got to be upfront about that.
Yeah. I started running Mothership. I played that at Worldcon, and we did an entire scenario where we fought limbs that regrew into monsters. And at the start, the plot started pretty generically. We showed up at the space station. We found a body floating in space. We brought it aboard the station. We searched it. It was dead. We boarded the ship, and we heard a noise behind us. And I was like, I mean, the thing's dead, and we go back around the corner and the thing's not dead. What made me panic was we shot it with the shotgun, which was the strongest damage weapon we had, and it didn't die. And then I was like, oh, fuck. We've only got 3 more shots left. And we're 30 minutes into the game.
We only have 3 more shots left, but it doesn't matter anyway, apparently, because we can't kill these things.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, we ended up just shooting it again, and it died, right?
okay.
But then it was at the cost of our ammo. So now, as players, we had removed our perceived ability to fight, because we only had 2 shots left. Later, we found an armory. We fought a big boss. It was really cool. The GM gave us more weapons so we could fight the boss, but there was that perception of we can't do anything about it. Now, in terms of like, I'm trying to think. You can role play like you don't know when you're playing these horror games, and I think that's the best way to do it. I think if you go in knowing I'm gonna die, then you're gonna have a more fun experience, right? I've only played Alien twice. I've played it twice. I've run it a million times. I've played it twice, and we did a scenario where we boarded a ship, and we were supposed to take cargo from. Went into the cargo bay, no one was there, the lights were off, and I described my captain. I was like, oh, she's going to go off, and I'm going to go find the deck officer. So I walked into this room, and the GM was describing it as being all creepy and dark, and the lights were flickering, and I was like, that's weird. And then the GM said, oh, you see something move around the corner of the room, the door at the end. And I was like, oh, it's the deck officer. So I just walk down the corridor. The GM looks at me like I'm like a crackhead, like, what are you doing? And I just walk, because my character wouldn't know that. I'm looking for the flight officer. The power might be out. So I just walk around the corner, fully expecting that's a xenomorph. It's going to meet Blender me. But in character, my character doesn't know that. So I just walk around the corner, and nothing was there, because the GM was trying to like build that tension. Now, as a player, I was pretty creeped out, but my character isn't at that point yet. So if you play like it's not a horror game, but you know it's a horror game, you're going to potentially add a bit to the experience. But that's not for everyone, because then you're putting yourself in harm's way, and you could just be deleting your character by doing that. And some people just don't have fun that way. Yeah, show don't tell. Exactly.
Oops.
It is in response to Anand's comment. Yeah. So yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, that thing looks dangerous. I'm gonna make a roll to see if it is, and now the player's having to think before they do, right? They're having to make decisions, and they're having to think a bit more before they just do something. But that is going to change rapidly based on what you're playing as well. Like if you're playing just regular D&D, players are going to run in and start stabbing everything, right?
I'll tell you what, though, there's fun ways to do it. I for my friends, I like just did a one shot that I just kind of was like, I'm just gonna improv most of it. But to start it off, when they were in the tavern, I just had a body drop from the sky.
Cool.
So just like splat in the middle, and it immediately got them into like, oh shit, like they didn't go interview anybody. They were just like, we've got to figure out what the body fell from this. We got to go get it. Like, and it got us out of that like sort of static tavern scene, of like, hey, well, there's monsters here's about, like, it just kind of right away. Monster.
It's, I think, context and tone setting is so vital. The good thing that Alien does, Mothership does it as well, is it's what Sable said, the reduction of resources. Everything you do is a cost, and all of a sudden you're going to run out of those things. Now, inherently, humans are resource gatherers, so we will gather stuff. and we'll hold on to it, and we'll wait to use it at the right time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What next? What happens when when your resources are limited? When are you going to start becoming desperate? When are you going to start using your desperate solutions? I had an alien scenario where they were all playing as like wailing tiny commandos. I gave them like buffed up stats. They went into the station. One of them got grabbed by a xenomorph, and I pulled them down a vent for 3 rounds. And on their turn, on the second round of being dragged, they drew their knife and they started stabbing the thing because they dropped their gun in the vent. The team had no way to get to them, so they were like, "Cool, well, I'm gonna probably get face hugged in a minute. I know this thing's gonna bleed acid on me, but I'm out of options. I'm just gonna start stabbing it." When the knife melted, they started punching it, and they started the player got desperate to try and save their character. Then
it's like what we were talking about earlier. You have put them in a situation where they need to end the stress now.
Yeah,
and so they're just making those decisions, and it's very fascinating. It's very, very fascinating. Apologies for the interruption.
No, and it's I took the resources away from them as well. So like when they were being dragged down the corridor, I had them roll a check to see if they could hold on to their gun, and they failed. So their gun got stuck on the ground. So I was stripping their agency, but I wasn't just taking it from them. They had a chance. What was that about the acid blood? You shoot the alien. The difference between, yes, you shoot the alien and the acid will blind you, versus you shoot the alien at range, but it's full of acid blood. Yeah, exactly. I also think it's important as well to visualize the threat to the players first. I think everyone coming into playing an alien game knows that the alien bleeds acid, so they know that maybe shooting it up close is probably a bad idea. But if you're running something D&D or 40k, or you're running a game, you're making a horror setting, and they're fighting, I don't know, a giant spider, it's maybe important to show them that it bleeds acid first before hurting them with it, so the players are able to try and defend against it, because then you start making it unfair for the player. Yeah, definitely.
One of your players is here.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, first session there, they went into the bridge of the ship, and the alien was hiding behind the command terminal, and two of them went in, and I attacked, rolled a 6, and he died. He just got deleted turn 1 of combat, and that's when the group were like, cool, we don't need to search the rest of this ship anyway, we'll leave now. And they backed out. After, I think, did some being set the bridge on fire, Defin? I can't remember. But they immediately were like, and backed away, right? So you gotta manage your expectations for your players, because like I said earlier, if it's unfair and the player feels like it's unfair, they're not having fun anymore.
Yeah.
But the urge can be there. Like you can really have the urge to, well, yeah, it's a xenomorph queen. It's gonna instantly kill you. Like, come on, bro. Like, but you just can't do that from a game design standpoint. Shoot an NPC first. You know, murder an NPC. Show them how violent and how dangerous this thing is. Show them. Don't tell them. Yeah.
Yep. I think that's good advice for just media in general.
Yeah.
It is, but I take issue with it.
Okay. Why?
Because it shouldn't be in a situation of active participants. It should not be show don't tell. So with literature, you were telling them, right? With film, you show don't tell. With with an audience participatory style of medium, it should be do don't show. So you're showing them, but it's through action, or you're allowing them to perform an action to discover what it is, the acid blood or something along those lines. That's me being pedantic. I get it. Show don't tell is perfectly fine. It's common parlance. I'm just being.
Yeah, I mean,
just being me.
Yeah, I think for the realm of you're interacting, you're doing it rather than telling it, right?
Yeah.
So I can see, I totally see the thought process there. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's probably more specifically applied to video games, but because TTRPGs are just
Video
they're
games.
kind of a little bit of
electric-
everything, right? It's kind of like a
Yeah.
little bit of everything. So it's perfectly reasonable to within the world, within the imagined space, to hand them a letter and tell them, or to show them rather than tell them, or
Mhm.
allow them to do something. So it's kind of a conglomeration of all three. But I'm now way sidetracking my own stream.
Hey, it's
And
fine.
it's completely off in left field. So
Hey,
let's
we're your
steer
guest.
back. But
That's
I would like to get you on again and discuss
Absolutely, I'm
role
happy
playing
anytime.
games in general,
Mhm.
because there are some ideas that I've had. There's some ideas that Jax and
Mhm.
I kick around. I would love to have your take. I would love to get
Mhm.
your thoughts on the subject.
I saw you did a video talking about how health in video games and having health is a bad idea,
Yeah.
and I
It
kind
depends on the game. I've
oh
come
yeah,
around on that. Yeah, like if you are playing a game of vampire or a superhero game, hit points could make sense. But there are, I think the vast majority of games, hit points is just not fit for purpose.
yeah. I mean, was it World of Darkness does the wounded, the wounded, afflicted, and the different kind of damage states rather than HP, which is
Yeah,
great.
Yeah.
lethal, aggravated. Yep.
That's it. Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I just watched all of Never Stop Blowing Up, and that's what they had there. It was like injury levels, and it had like mechanical impact.
Yeah, Mithras does the same thing. RuneQuest does that, where it's like targeted injury, where you can lose a limb or you can injure a limb and have to drop whatever you're carrying, can't use that limb anymore. So if you're proficient sword and shield, you might lose your sword arm or your shield arm, or you'll have to adapt that way.
40k RPG and Halo Mythic does that as well. You've got negative HP pools for all of your limbs. And I've had it where I dismembered one of my Spartans. I cut one of their arms off. I shot one of them in the spine, and they had to roll toughness to grit through the pain to keep their gun up.
Man.
And all of a sudden they got ambushed, so they were like, uh-oh. And they started getting like needled in the the necks and the knees and their shins, getting pinned to the ground, having to shoot their guns with one hand to fight the enemy. And all of a sudden they were taking these negative injuries, bleeding, having to deal with their blood loss in the fight. And it completely, they went from being like super commandos to we're the prey now. And it was great for that one encounter. It's always the shins. I'm coming for your shins, Stefan. I'm gonna come for them tomorrow. It always seems to hit whenever I deal special damage. It always hits them in the left shin. It's always the left shin. I don't know why, but the dice just go that way. But it's great. Again, it's agency. Does the player determine how to interpret the situation, or are they told? Depends on the GM, right?
That's weird that you walk on your shins, dude.
Shin Walker.
That actually sounds really creepy. Like Shinwalker.
Sounds like Skinwalker.
Yeah.
Who needs feet? Just walk on your shins.
Oh,
I bet it makes a scraping noise as you do as well. Gross. You see how we all negatively reacted to that?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Yeah. Yeah, really. Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm not squeamish, but bones sticking out stuff, I can't. I just can't. Even if I know it's fake. I just,
yeah, does the player determine how to interpret a situation, or are they told? So I think it's a bit of both. I think if you're wanting to set a precedent for your players, I did this yesterday for my session. my players are preparing for this big operation, and I told them that they might be feeling apprehension or they might be feeling afraid, but they know how to cope with these emotions and hide them. But these are the kind of emotions you might be feeling. So I'm kind of like setting the tone for them, saying, "Oh, this is quite a stressful situation," but the player doesn't necessarily have to be like that. They could just be like, "Well, no, I know what I'm getting into, so my character isn't going to be worried here."
I
But
like
someone
that.
else,
I like that. I tend to be averse to a GM, well, what I'll call playing my character for me, which is where they'll tell me, what I'm seeing, where I'm walking, how I've done something. But sort of just placing the suggestion there, saying you might feel this way, you might feel that way, to sort of tone set, I think is it's brilliant, because then that leaves the decision in the player's hands, but you know exactly what kind of situation you're walking into. I think that's pretty pretty excellent.
Yeah. And I mean, but this also to me comes down this comment, it comes down to like the perception of agency. So is the player determining how to interpret a situation based on the information that you've been given, and therefore it's actually not your agency. This has been decided for you, um, you know, or is it just bare bones information and you've gone out of left field, which definitely can happen. Like play with some characters, right?
I think it's contextual to what you're playing, because if it's something sci-fi or something the players have no context for, then you need to kind of give them context cues for how that might be making them feel. But it's important that the player has the final say in how they're feeling. And this is why Jax? Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. Like they have the final say. I sort of think it's like it kind of raises a question of authorship, though. I guess.
Is there a difference?
Like this thing of is there a difference between? Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, that's getting into bleed. Which I
This guy
think,
here?
yeah, I think we should set as a conversation for another day, because it's for me, it's getting.
Yeah, I agree, and I want to be respectful of your time. I know that there's a gulf between the three of us. So if you want to, I mean, these questions are going to be here. I can certainly transcribe them and distribute them so that when next we meet, we can get into it. I'd also like to get into the previous topic that I mentioned about role playing games in general. What is sort of the elements of a role playing game in your view? So I guess more time than I've ever given anyone else on the channel, I'm going to ask you the question, what's a role-playing game, or how do you define a role-playing game? How do you define role-playing? So you'll get a little lead of that. But what an interesting conversation. Just fantastic. I'm over the moon about this stream. So thank you both so much. I really, really appreciate your time. I appreciate the time of day that you're able to sit down and do this. I know it's late for you guys. So thank you. If there's anything else you'd like to say, Ben, is there anywhere that anyone can find you? Jax, same thing.
I suppose you can find me on Twitter. It's just Ben Rimmer on Twitter. You'll find me. Other than that, I am working on creating so my Halo game. We're looking at putting the entire game up on YouTube. Once it's all done, so I think we've got around about 86 gigabytes of footage to go through for the entire thing. So that's from just before December's worth of games. So if Ben's on Discord, you can send them an invite. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I'll send it your way, man.
Yeah.
Or Jax.
That's me. Once I've got all that set up, I can share that over. Once I've finished my current game, I'm looking to do. So my current game has 2 parties in it, and both parties interact simultaneously with the world. I'm looking to do more West March style games, because I like the kind of meta elements of the tactics. So there's a high possibility in the future I might open up a larger role-playing community, possibly for something like Aliens. So if that all kicks off, you'll be the first to know here.
Awesome. That's very exciting. And Jax?
Amazing. Thank you again. You keep having me back. I always appreciate it.
I I mean, you're the co-host as far as you're an intermittent co-host as far as I'm concerned.
Well, happy to be so. If people want to find me, I'm ranting cinephile on most things, and Jax of all trades on TikTok.
All right, and you can find me here, and that's all I'll say about that. Thank you,
The
everyone.
bacon.
I appreciate the attendance. I appreciate the questions. Really active chat this time. Everyone really seemed to love the
Solid
conversation.
chat.
Yeah,
It was
thank you all for the
really
questions.
fantastic. So I'm going to click end, and it's going to not end immediately. So I'm probably going to end up with a dumb looking face or something like that. But we'll see you all next time. Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.